Welcome to Between Two Speakers, where we speak about speaking and communications. I'm Randy Ford. I'm a writer and storytelling strategist. You can find me at firststorystrategies.com.
And hi, everyone. I'm Mariana Swallow. I am a professional communications and public speaking workshop leader and coach. I also teach business and professional speaking at Loyola University in Chicago. You can find me at marianaswallow.com. And I love today's topic because it's basically I get to ask Randy whatever I want about speaking. And this isn't just me ambushing Randy. There are some things, Randy, that like I've wondered about. I want to draw on your professional experience for our listeners, but also kind of selfishly for myself. So if you're game, I'll just jump in and throw you some questions.
Go for it.
So, Randy, I know something I get asked about a lot is how do I prepare a speech? But something that I think is very common these days is being on podcasts or interviews or one on ones, like in a video interview like this that you and I often do. So, you had a career in broadcasting, both in radio and TV, and you did some podcast work for a while. How can someone prepare themselves for either an audio interview or a podcast if they're the one being interviewed?
Yeah, I think the most important thing is to be familiar with the podcast. You don't want to go into it having never listened to it yourself.
Hmm.
You'll always want to go in and listen to a couple of episodes or watch a couple episodes if it's some kind of web video series, because you want to know what the host is expecting, what the host is like, how you may interact, and you also want to know what the audience expects.
Hmm.
I did a great podcast that I love. I've been a guest on a couple times called Five Easy Things, and the host Yolanda will just turn the floor over to you, and you get to share five easy things about a topic. And I listen to them, and it's clear when people like me are fans of Five Easy Things, as opposed to people who are maybe just coming on it and don't
Mm.
really understand the format. And they may have five things to share, but they're not prepared for the actual format and the actual forum. So I think that's the biggest thing in preparation, is watching, listening, observing.
I love it. I love it. Should someone make notes while they're preparing and listening, or just anything they might want to keep in mind when they get to the interview?
Yeah, if it helps you, I think you and I are examples of kind of opposite ends of the note-taking spectrum. You are a great note taker. I
Nice.
can take notes, but I often don't refer back to them. So I
Mm,
try to remember things more. But yeah, definitely. And for that one, for example, I definitely jotted down my five things. I didn't try to wing it. So
good.
yeah, I think to the extent that notes are comfortable and helpful for you, yeah, go for it.
Okay, I love it. Well, piggybacking off that, because I know this is a worry for people with presenting, but also if they're being interviewed, how do you avoid the filler words like y-
Oh.
other people, I know my filler word is okay. It's my way of saying like, did you get what I said? But I get asked this a lot, and I know how to tell people to avoid this for presentations, but when you're going to go on the air, when you're going to go on a podcast, how can you make sure that you don't trip and say ums, ah, ers,
Yeah. The first thing is, it's okay to do it a little bit,
hmm.
especially if you're in a situation where you're trying to come across conversationally, because we do that conversationally. If you're in line at Chipotle and you forget which salsa you want for a second, you might, okay, I'll take the hot one. So it's a natural thing. The
Hmm.
problem comes when it is too much
Yeah.
and it distracts from what is in between those fillers. And I do it sometimes too. It's funny that you mentioned that yours is okay, because the very first time I was ever aware of this as a thing was in third grade, when my teacher, who is fairly new to the classroom, would use okay a lot. And it
Hmm.
really frustrated her, because she had been taught in her university program not to say the word okay. And what her professor had told her was, tell your students when they hear you say okay to all bang on their desks. And she had us doing that for a while, until it was really
Mm.
annoying for all of us. And she just accepted that she was going to say okay sometimes. I think the biggest one, which I just did, is uh, um,
Mm.
um, and like I said, I just did it because it's fairly natural. I think what is good is to be aware of it, listen back to when you are giving speeches or having short conversations.
Hmm.
Notice when you do it, and try to get in the habit. This is easier said than done, but try to get in the habit of replacing that with just a very quick inhale. Just
Mm-hmm.
teach yourself to just
I like.
pause and inhale, and people are not going to notice that. It might feel noticeable if you're like gulping in air while you're speaking, but if
Mm-hmm.
you learn to do it subtly enough, it is not something that people are going to notice. It takes practice to get to that point, but then there, there are the other filler words that people use as kind of a verbal crutch. The one that comes to mind is long story short. By the time we hear that, the story's probably already been too long, or
Right.
the long and short of it is, or things like that that are also filler words. And that's why it's important to listen back to what you're saying and how you're communicating, so that you can take note of those yourself, not to beat yourself up about them,
Right.
just be aware and see if you can tackle it and change that behavior.
Yeah, and I think your point about not to beat yourself up about it, because whenever I ask my clients or my students, please watch your video, right away I get the reaction. And I'm going to be very honest and self-disclosing here. I hate watching myself too. And I, just, I just did an I found a speech I gave 3 years ago that was on YouTube that I didn't even know about. And I always wanted to see that speech. And I went, oh, I better watch this. And let's just say I'm about 2 minutes in, and we'll just leave it at that.
But even those 2 minutes, you probably learned something, and the rest of it, there was probably much more there that was good
Yeah.
than was bad. And you chose to, as is human nature for most of us,
Hmm.
to remember those bad parts. And that's what you took away and made it into
Right.